Hello and welcome to my cruise pod. I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. This week in cruise news, we've got some big updates, from price hikes and new taxes to itinerary changes, new ships, even a cruise scam. There's a lot to unpack, so let's dive right in. Last episode, I told you about a proposed new Mexican cruiser tax that was making its way through Mexican legislation. I am sad to say that unfortunately that tax has been officially approved. Now, what this means is that cruise passengers calling upon Mexican ports of call are going to have to pay more starting in 2025. So this is a big cruise destination for Americans. It gets about 10 million cruisers that call on Mexican ports each year. So this is a big part of the Mexican tourism industry. Now, what's frustrating to a lot of people about this bill is the fact that the Mexican government passed this really without any type of heads up or dialogue with the cruise lines or the cruise industry or the Cruise Line Industry Association. So it kind of blindsided everyone. And it's also frustrating because it's going to apply to all cruisers, whether or not you get off the ship. So even if you stay on the ship, you're still going to get hit with that $42 per person fee. Now, it's still unclear. I don't know if the legislation hasn't just clarified this yet, or it hasn't made its way to the media, and it seems unclear if this is per port or per sailing. Now, this could be potentially devastating if it is per port, because there are a lot of common cruise itineraries that call upon multiple Mexican ports. So think of the West Coast. There are some Ensenada sailings that call upon 3 Mexican ports. Western Caribbean, you could be calling upon Costa Maya, Progreso, Cozumel, 2 or 3 ports. So if you multiply that $42 times multiple ports times multiple people, that could get really expensive really fast. Now, this is supposed to apply to bookings starting in 2025. And what's also frustrating to a lot of people is that the funds are not being used to build up and develop the cruise port areas in Mexico. And some of them, like Progreso, are in dire need of some government investment, shall we say. But instead, 2/3 of this funding is going to the Mexican Army. Now, Mexico has previously imposed a $35 tourist tax. But historically, cruise passengers were exempt from this because they were sleeping on the ship, not actually spending a night in Mexico until now. So the addition of this tax, again, has come as a total surprise to the cruise industry, which has already sold cruises to Mexico for the upcoming 2025 travel season. So this is really late in the game. And I personally have a number of cruises booked that call upon Mexico. So I'm really curious how this is going to shake out. Now, the cruise industry is, again, kind of raising alarm about this, and they're trying to fight back, and they have shared some statements that basically are calling upon the Mexican government to at least please delay the rollout of this. So how this ends up being deployed kind of still remains to be seen. But I know there's been a lot of uproar about it on social media. I've posted a lot of content about it. And while some people are kind of accepting of it and understanding of it, the majority of people seem pretty upset by it. And the vast majority of people indicate that they'll just pick another itinerary that doesn't call upon Mexico in lieu of paying the fee. So we'll see how this shakes out. Back in the early 2010s, Alaska implemented a significant tax and ended up having to roll it back a few years later. They still have it, but they lowered the cost because of this overwhelming backlash and the subsequent impact on the industry. And Alaska has a huge benefit that Mexico doesn't have. If you take an Alaskan sailing, you need to call upon places in Alaska. However, the Caribbean has a lot of different destinations. So Mexico, you got a lot of competition. And I know for me, as much as I love most Mexican ports of call, especially Cozumel, I'm not going to pay that much more to go there. I'll go to another spot in the Caribbean just as easily and save a lot of money. So what do you think now that this is officially passed? Is this going to change the way you make decisions and itinerary choices? Are you going to avoid cruises that go to Mexico because of this fee, or is it business as usual? Now, if that weren't enough for cruisers in terms of a financial slap in the face, we're getting it from all angles. But Carnival has enacted a pretty steep price hike. And they're making waves, and not the good kind, after announcing this price hike and doing it, in my opinion, in kind of a shady way, but we'll talk about that. But in case you haven't heard, they rolled out this price hike on drink packages and Wi-Fi starting now. And that's what's frustrating to a lot of people. The Cheers beverage package went up for those longer cruises. Now, the shorter cruises, they kind of stay the same. But traditionally, if you booked a 7-day or longer sailing, you had a better price on the Cheers package. So it has gone up $12 per person per day, roughly, and some change. So that's a pretty steep hike. And when it comes to Wi-Fi, that has also seen an increase, not as much. That particular price hike is around $3 more per day for everyone that buys the Wi-Fi. Now, these price hikes have sparked a lot of frustration among loyal Carnival cruisers, and people are starting to question whether the value of Carnival still is aligned with the cost. Now, Carnival and Carnival bootlickers, and I love Carnival and I love cruise culture, but sometimes there are a lot of corporate apologists and you all drive me crazy because people are allowed to question price hikes and people are allowed to have thoughts about it, but sometimes on social media, people just come to the defense of the cruise lines. And yes, it is business, it is economics, but consumers also have a right to complain about it and to also speak with their wallet and book with other cruise lines. Now, Carnival argues that these increases reflect rising operational costs. And hey, I get it, but with other cruise lines offering competitive perks, not as many recurring price increases, because this is another issue. Carnival just keeps hitting it with these price increases simultaneously while cutting back. Just last week, I talked about how they cut back late night pizza. So now pizza is not available till 4 in the morning anymore. It's only available until midnight. So yeah, I understand you've got to keep up with inflation and all of these operational costs and these increases, but you can't start having that outpace your competition, because if you do, you're known as the value cruise line. You got to tread carefully, not swing the pendulum too far, and to alienate your loyal customer base, who by and large cruise you because you are a good value proposition. So I know a lot of folks are upset about this. For me, I get that price increases, they just have to happen. It's basic economics. But what frustrates me to no end about this is how Carnival rolled it out. I really don't like this. Historically, when Carnival has enacted a price increase on these ancillary products like drink packages, Wi-Fi, gratuities, things like that, they have given cruisers a heads up. So we've had time to go in for all the cruises that we have booked for the next year or a year and a half or 2 years even. And we have time to sort of be grandfathered in at the current lower rate. And so I have a number of Carnival cruises booked. And had I known that this change was coming, I'm not a drinker, so the drink package doesn't affect me, but Wi-Fi sure as heck does. I would have gone in and prepaid and pre-bought this before the price hike took effect. And it's also frustrating, I am a travel agent, and travel agents weren't even given a heads up. And so travel agents are unhappy because we were kind of left looking silly with our clients, because normally it's our job to give our clients the heads up of, hey, this price hike is coming, lock down this price now before it goes up. So I really wish Carnival had handled this differently. I wish they had handled it the way they have pretty much every other price increase and not been so sneaky about it, because that just added fuel to the fire. So what do you think? Are these price increases no big deal? Do you wish Carnival had given cruisers a heads up? I personally don't like this. I love Carnival, but this one makes me very unhappy, but I wanna know, what do you think? Now let's talk about cruise cancellations and itinerary changes, because it has been quite a chaotic week when it comes to itineraries. Going back to Carnival, Carnival's just really testing their cruisers this week. They have revised itineraries for 7 of their ships that impact sailings from now through April. Ports of call have been shuffled around, and in some cases, sailings and calls have been shortened. One thing that's frustrating people is the lack of specificity around these changes and why they're made. And Carnival is kind of just giving this vague operational reasons and provide very minimal specifics, leaving some cruisers disappointed with last-minute changes because, you know, you book excursions in advance. You pick whole cruises based on itineraries. And if it's going to call to a different location, you probably wouldn't have picked that. And what a lot of cruisers don't realize is that when you book a cruise, you are agreeing to that cruise line's contract of carriage. And it is very favorable to the cruise line, not very favorable to the consumer. So basically they have carte blanche to make whatever changes they would like, including changes of length of sailing, changes of ports of call, changes of the times at those ports of call, and cruisers have no recourse. And in most cases, you can't even cancel without incurring a fee or a substantial penalty. So these are very favorable to cruise lines, and these itinerary changes then create some frustration because cruisers can't just simply say, okay, well, I don't like this itinerary now. I'm gonna go and book something different. You're pretty much stuck with what they offer you. But Carnival's not the only one that's had some itinerary chaos. Norwegian Cruise Line has also upset their base by announcing a whopping 35 cruise cancellations for 2025. Now, most of the Norwegian cancellations primarily affect Norwegian Spirit. That makes sense in this case. It's because it's undergoing dry dock, which is not uncommon. And if you're not familiar with that, that's when an old ship needs some, shall we say, freshening up. So they take it out of the rotation, they put it into dry dock, they spruce it up and make it nice and fancy, and then put it back into their fleet. But if you're booked on any of these ships or dates, make sure you check your reservation and make sure you contact the cruise line for your options. Although a lot of times you have no recourse, but sometimes they will allow you to receive a refund or rebook at no cost. So it's always worth it to check your options. Now, you probably like to cruise if you're watching this video. So the idea of being able to have an all-you-can-cruise pass for a year probably sounds pretty appealing, right? Well, you actually have a chance to do just that. Coming off the heels of Black Friday, Virgin Voyages has offered an innovative annual cruise pass that allows cruisers to work remotely or not if you're retired or don't have to work while sailing year-round. Now, what's great about this promotion is that it is truly unlimited. You can pick any Virgin ship, any itinerary, including their European and Mediterranean sailings. You can stack your cruises back to back. And you can even bring a companion, and that companion is interchangeable. So you can change out your friends and family and ball it up for a year with different people, which sounds super fun. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a dream come true for a lot of folks, including digital nomads. However, there's a big catch, and that is the price. And it's hard for me to see this as anything other than a gimmick. And I love Virgin, but this kind of makes me give them the side eye because it is $120,000. That's out of reach for the vast majority of folks. It's a hefty price tag. And paired with the logistical challenges of actually coordinating back-to-back sailings and transportation to enough of the different departure ports to make it justifiable to even purchase, it makes it a tough sell for most. So it's an interesting marketing move and pretty good in theory, but I'm not convinced that it is anything more than just a gimmick. So come on, Virgin, do better, come up with better promotions. I love their innovation, but this one's just really not feasible. Honestly, I can't see anybody buying it. And those of us that are really in the know, we know how to cruise for free all we want unlimited anyway by maximizing casino offers. I have a whole video on that. I'll drop the link below if you want to check it out. Next, I want to talk about Royal Caribbean and a big change that they've recently made. Royal Caribbean seems to be a little draconian lately. They have decided to update their list of banned items. Last week, I told you Carnival has now banned Bluetooth devices. And this week, it's Royal Caribbean's turn to enact a digital ban. And in this case, they are banning portable Wi-Fi devices like travel routers. Now, cruisers are frustrated by the high cost of Wi-Fi. As I just told you, Carnival jacking up the price of the Wi-Fi. It just keeps going up and up and up. And while cruise line Wi-Fi is superior by leaps and bounds now with Starlink than it was even a couple of years ago, when it used to be pretty much trash, it's still not always great. It's not always consistently reliable. So if you're like me and you have to work on a cruise ship, you're very dependent on Wi-Fi. So a lot of cruisers have started to work around the unreliability of cruise ship Wi-Fi and the exorbitant cost of it by purchasing and bringing their own portable Wi-Fi devices. So Royal Caribbean has said, nope, we're not gonna do it. Now, the reason that they're saying that they're forbidding these devices is because they say it interferes with their ship's own onboard network. Now, I don't know if I'm just a skeptic and don't always believe cruise lines when it comes to their business decisions. I don't know if I believe that or not. I think it's more of a self-preservation thing where they make a lot of money off of their cruisers buying Wi-Fi and they don't want that competition. Now, Royal Caribbean does seem to be the more strict of the cruise lines. A lot of the other ones haven't started cracking down on the portable Wi-Fi devices yet, but I see that this is probably, I predict, the first of many. I think they're all gonna eventually ban this because, again, that's a huge revenue line for them. But Royal Caribbean is also really strict with extension cords. Most of the cruise lines will allow cruisers to bring a multi-plug extension cord as long as it's non-surge. Royal Caribbean is the exception. They do not allow any extension cords at all even if they're non-surge. And just a couple of months ago, they actually banned multi-plug extenders as well, which is fine if you're on a newer cruise ship like Icon or Utopia, where there are more feasible options for plugs. But if you sail on an old cruise ship, it's really frustrating because sometimes you literally have 1-2 outlet plug and that's it. So it's kind of hard if you've got 2, 3, 4 people in a stateroom and you're a girl and you've got hair products and that need to be plugged in. It's just a difficult logistic challenge in charging phones and cameras and all these things. So if you're sailing with Royal Caribbean, leave those things at home. Don't try to bring your portable Wi-Fi device. Don't try to bring your extension cords. You have to rely on the cruise ship's onboard power and internet options, which might feel limiting, but that's what you gotta accept when you sail with Royal Caribbean. Speaking of Royal Caribbean, they're welcoming a new ship to Port Canaveral. So Port Canaveral is outside of Orlando, not in Orlando. Cruisers often think this and it cracks me up because Orlando is pretty landlocked unless you count the swamps. Port Canaveral is about 45 to 50 minutes away from Orlando. But Port Canaveral and Port Miami, they usually jockey for the #1 cruise port in the world in terms of volume of passengers. But Port Canaveral has just welcomed its 4th Royal Caribbean ship, Mariner of the Seas. This is one of Royal Caribbean's Voyager class ships, and with it they plan to offer sailings to the Bahamas and the Caribbean. So kind of their standard itinerary with stops at Perfect Day at Coco Cay, which is their private island, which I think is great, by the way. Love Perfect Day. Port Canaveral does continue to grow as a major hub for cruising, especially with this breaking news that Celebrity is sailing its first ever itinerary out of Port Canaveral on the equinox. So with these additions from Royal Caribbean and Celebrity, cruisers now have more options out of Port Canaveral than ever. And I want to wrap this episode up with a caution to cruisers because there is a new cruise scam making its way around, as a group of Royal Caribbean passengers recently, unfortunately, discovered the hard way. What happened was they booked what they thought was a Royal Caribbean cruise, but it was through a fraudulent website posing as the cruise line. So this is what is traditionally called a phishing scam. So it involves trying to get payment information and then poof, vanishing without a trace and scamming people out of their money and their credit card information. And this is something I'd like to point out because while I think most people probably are savvy enough to be able to tell the difference between Royal Caribbean's website and an imposter website, I see this happen all the time. It actually happened to me. I had a client that had to make a change on her booking she made with me on Celebrity, and I Googled Celebrity's phone number because it was something I couldn't do in my travel agent portal. So I had to call. And when I searched and just Googled like everyone does, Celebrity Cruise Line, interestingly enough, Celebrity's phone number, their real phone number, did not come up at the top. So sometimes travel agencies that are unscrupulous will optimize search engine optimization. So when you search for a cruise line, they appear at the top of those search rankings. And a lot of us just assume that the legit one is going to be first. So anytime you have to go to a cruise line's website or call their phone number, make sure you're calling the correct one. Make sure you're going to the correct website because it's an easy way to get scammed. And I've heard this happen a lot with fake websites, but more commonly with the fake phone numbers. So when in doubt, go directly to the cruise line's official website. And when you're booking, as always, with a travel agent, make sure it's someone that is trusted, that you vetted, and you've actually read referrals from real clients that have used them and had a really good experience. So yet another crazy week in cruise news. If you found this information helpful or interesting, make sure you visit my website at profmelissa.com. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And I want to know what you think about these things. All kinds of things happening, and I find them all really interesting, sometimes frustrating, but interesting. And I want to know what the cruise community thinks. And on my website, profmelissa.com, you'll find all kinds of great free cruising information, including free port guides and everything else in between. So until next time, happy cruising.